Great. Well, a randomized control trial was recently done looking at the effects of a high-fat meal on concentration. And so immediately what piqued my interest is so often the news that we hear about high-fat diets are around the long-term implications for heart disease or Alzheimer's risk, cancer risk, but they don't really delve into what are the immediate consequences
Sure.
of eating a single high-fat meal. And this study was really elegantly designed to answer that question.
Nice. Well, yeah, that is the big question. I mean, like you said, folks, long-term effects, well, that's going to happen 20, 30 years. I'm not so concerned about that right now, but what about if someone gives me a memory test after I eat this I don't know, hamburger? What
Absolutely.
happens?
Yeah, what they were doing is the high fat meals were meals that consisted of sausage, biscuits with gravy. So they were largely breakfast meals that had high fat content. So and all of us have had the experience of going into a meeting feeling a little groggy or not as sharp as we'd like. We've
Sure.
taken tests in the morning that are very important, determine the trajectory of our lives, like SATs and so forth. And
Yeah.
even on a smaller scale, the tests that you take in school when you're in high school and college, and then going on your performance giving talks or leading discussions, they all matter.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I can tell you for me in the past anyway, when I was eating the standard American diet, I always felt kind of, well, after a nice big meal, kind of tired, just need a nap or something like that.
Oh, I totally agree. And so often people who enjoy intermittent fasting and so forth, they feel the benefits of having more energy. And I think one of the things that's coming to light is that part of the reason they may feel so good, and when people transition to a plant-based diet, you certainly see it, is that you have more energy when you're not eating a bunch of toxins and asking your body to process a bunch of food that doesn't belong in our bodies.
Oh, I would absolutely agree. So in this study, in this particular article that
Yeah.
talked about the study, what was it? What was the factor that caused, the negative consequences here?
Yeah, and that's one of the things I like about this study is that they tried to pinpoint what's going on. What about the high-fat meals is leading to the impairments in concentration that they were very clearly able to measure. And what they found is that for about a quarter of the participants, eating high fat, regardless of whether it's saturated fat or polyunsaturated fat, whatever kind of fat they were eating, they would have really high surges in endotoxins. And endotoxins are things that are created by the bacteria in our intestines and then get released. And when you eat a high-fat diet, there's two main mechanisms that we know of that lead to these endotoxins leaking from the gut into our bloodstream. And the first is the fat actually helps bind the endotoxins so that they can spread more easily through our blood.
Oh, no.
The fat also disrupts the barrier in our intestines so that the endotoxins can actually leak into the bloodstream.
Okay. All right. So that describes a leaky gut. Is that right? The condition when that occurs in someone?
Absolutely.
Okay. So whenever someone has more of a leaky gut, it sounds like they're going to have more of these issues that are the result of that.
Absolutely. So people who are vulnerable to endotoxin release, and the study didn't go so far as to identify why this 25% of the population seemed to be so susceptible to this high-fat diet leading to the impairment in concentration. But for whatever reason, about a quarter of the participants were very susceptible to the negative effects of eating a high-fat diet.
Okay. Okay. And then
And then
go ahead.
Oh, and then I was going to say, and then additionally, there was a group of people who, it was a fairly large group, about another fifth or sixth of the participants who didn't have a rise in endotoxin release, but who by virtue of eating particularly the saturated fat also had a rise or a decrease in concentration.
Okay,
A rise in cognitive impairment. So, so presumably there's other mechanisms separate from endotoxin release that make saturated fat in particular a problematic nutrient for concentration.
okay, so it's bad. This study sounds like it was able to single it out as much as possible and determine that it's got mainly negative consequences to consuming the saturated fat. So for most people out there, you may know where it's from, but can you describe to us foods that are going to be high in these saturated fats?
Saturated fats include basically every animal product. So any beef, chicken, eggs, cheese in particular is extraordinarily high in saturated fat. Milk, all of those animal products. There are some non-animal products that have a higher proportion of saturated fat. But those are quite rare. They include things like cashews or coconuts, coconut oil. So those are a couple of different foods to look out for. But by and large, if you stop eating animal products, your saturated fat intake will be very low.
Okay, perfect. So that's good advice, simple advice. Get rid of the animal products where possible, improve your memory, your cognitive ability. And then
Absolutely.
you're also saying cashews and coconut. I see in a lot of vegan processed foods. I see that a lot nowadays. The ice creams, the cheeses. So just got to be careful about that, I think.
Yeah, and it makes and I think that when you realize that things start coming together. Oh, what do we use as a replacement for cheese? Cashew cheese, or why might that, or coconut milk, to create the creaminess that butter creates in an Indian dish. And why might that be? Well, the saturated fat has certain properties that make it a closer or higher fidelity to the animal products that many of us grew up consuming. So it feels very familiar, but that's why it's so important to be aware of this and really start developing the taste for healthy, low-fat foods that are high in nutrients, because you will get used to it, you will enjoy them a lot more, and they will serve your health.
Okay, and now to go on to some of the effects of that were noted that were negative here. They're saying cognitive, right? This has to do with your memory. Is that at least, this is short-term memory, at least, is it what is addressed here in the study? Is that right?
Good question. So they did look at short-term memory. The impairments in short-term memory weren't as consistent as concentration itself. So there are specific validated tests that researchers give to break down the different areas in cognition, or essentially brain function. And the place where they saw the greatest impairment was concentration. People drifting, their attention drifting off, unable to maintain focus. Now, your intuition is right, because very short-term memory is a key component to concentration, because you have to be keeping things in your brain in order to stay focused on them. So there is overlap, and very short-term memory is implicated in concentration. So that was one of the areas of impairment, yes.
All right, well, this could be far-reaching in terms of its benefits, as I would say. I mean, obviously this study looked at some negative consequences, but I'm thinking benefits. If you're saying that concentration is the biggest benefit that you will gain if you avoid saturated fat, well, I say, like, attention deficit disorder is a big thing we hear about. Other things, just in kids, as far as I know, most kids are probably eating a lot of saturated fat. So this is something that probably needs to be looked into.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's a really great point, because we know from the most recent census done by the USDA, the census on what Americans eat, they found that about 1/5 of kids' meals involve pizza. So thinking about all the saturated fat and processed, flour that's going into the diet of kids just on the basis of pizza alone, that's certainly impairing their educational attainment. no doubt about it. And for all of us, these effects they observed for up to 5 hours. They stopped measuring at the 5-hour mark, and they continued seeing impairments all the way through. So, for some people, they may not notice a huge difference in in the cognitive effects. But if you're one of these people who is having the rise in endotoxin release, or just the saturated fat is affecting your functioning, this could make a huge difference in your productivity, the quality of your work, and how much you enjoy your day.
And I have a question. Since I kind of made the relation back to younger folks, the kids, attention deficit disorder. How about older folks? And I think we've done videos before about dementia, things like that. Might this potentially be related?
Absolutely. Now, that's one of the areas where, first of all, Alzheimer's disease and dementia in general is one of those areas where we're only now beginning to explore the degree to which these conditions can be prevented through diet. But there is a lot of exciting research and money being poured in because there aren't great therapeutics. It's one of the areas where researchers are really considering what can be done around nutrition to really impact, especially among individuals who are at high risk. And we know through a series of studies that have come from Rush University in Chicago and some other sites that there is a significant impact on eating healthfully and staying away from saturated fats and fats in general, and lower risk of cognitive decline.
Okay, would it be accurate to say that this can be almost analogous to heart disease? Because I suppose this is a factor in heart disease, eating saturated fat, but not only does it affect usually the smallest portions of the circulatory system first, like in the guys, they say like the penis is the canary in the coal mine. Something is not working right there. It's probably got circulatory issues, right? Well, maybe this memory is the canary in the coal mine on the brain part, because that blood still flows up into the brain. It all may be related, right?
Absolutely. And actually, vascular dementia is the second most common reason for dementia, and that's essentially atherosclerosis happening in the arteries of the brain. So you start having small clots impairing circulation in your brain, and now your cognitive function slowly decreases over time as these small clots add up. The processes are presumably a little different because what we're seeing here is endotoxin release, whereas saturated fat also plays a role in inciting inflammation and leading to the deposition of calcium and plaque because immune cells come and get activated. So there's a lot of remodeling of blood vessels that happen as a result of atherosclerosis with saturated fat intake. So the mechanisms may be a little different, but that's why it's so important when someone says, oh, well, I don't need to eat healthy because there's no heart disease in my family. Well, there may be no heart disease, but you may have a real problem with cognition. You may say, oh, well, I don't need to worry about Alzheimer's. I don't know anyone in my family who has Alzheimer's. I don't have the ApoE gene. Maybe you're low risk for Alzheimer's, but what about your cancer risk? Because obviously chronic inflammation plays a role in many kinds of cancers, and it's well known that saturated fat is especially through red meat and processed meat, is a risk factor for many different kinds of cancers. So all of this connects, and I think it's really worth taking seriously as we start to understand how food can impact so many different elements of our health.
Yeah, it's probably the number one factor, number one impactor. And I'm glad to hear. Thank you for delivering this information to us, because it's, in my mind, some good news that so many of the things that affect people, these negative things that we discussed here in this video, could potentially be reversed, right? Or at least prevented from happening in the first place.
Absolutely. And, there's no guarantees with any medication and with food in general, but we do, the beautiful thing about food is that maybe there's no guarantee that it's going to improve your performance on the SAT, but it will improve your life. It will improve the quality of your life. One way or the other, it's decreasing the risk of so many things that you don't want to happen. And it's improving, it helps you lose weight. It helps you have more energy. All of these things are possible with a healthy diet. So, that's the difference between it and a medicine that focuses on a specific pathway and tries to affect one area of your health. Food impacts everything. So I haven't met a person who hasn't had, some meaningful benefit by trying to improve their diet.
Yeah, and I'd say just the overall feeling great is not really, it's hard to put a value on that, but I know from my experience and probably your own experience, that when you eat better, when you do what's right for your body, that you provide the conditions that your body thrives under, that your body responds, and you just feel great. So
Absolutely, and you're a positive influence to those around you. And listen, there are things out of our control. If we do get sick, at least we have the comfort of knowing, hey, I took care of myself. I put myself in the best position to avoid this illness, and also I'm putting myself in a great position to recover when the treatments come. So I think that there's just so much benefit to taking your own health in your own hands. So.
all right, well, thanks for this message. Where can folks contact you if they want to reach out?
Yeah, I'd love to hear and get to know any of our listeners. My website is nickborjamd.com, and there you can sign up for a free consultation and get to know me.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you so much for being here. I'm excited. I'm going to avoid all the saturated fats as much as I possibly can, if not completely eliminate them, and look forward to talking with you again in our next video.
Great. Thank you, Mike.
You're welcome.